The warrior trials of Ironhold were legendary throughout the northern kingdoms, drawing the strongest fighters from every clan and territory to compete for the ultimate honor, a place in Warlord Thane Blackwater's elite guard. For 3 centuries, only the most exceptional warriors had earned the right to bear his mark, to stand beside the most feared military commander in the known world, which made my presence here a source of endless amusement for everyone else. My name is Kira Stormwind, and at 19 I was already considered a failure by every measure that mattered to my people. While other warriors my age had spent years honing their skills with sword and axe, I had been relegated to the healing tents, deemed too weak and clumsy for proper combat training. My slight frame and delicate features marked me as someone better suited to tending wounds than causing them. The mockery had started the moment I arrived at the trial grounds 3 days ago. Warriors twice my size took one look at me and burst into laughter that echoed across the stone courtyards of Ironhold's ancient fortress. They called me Little Bird and Flower Girl, making jokes about whether I had gotten lost on my way to a weaving circle. "Look at that one," said Bjorn Ironside, a massive bear of a man whose reputation for brutality was matched only by his arrogance. "Did someone's daughter get confused and think this was a festival? She looks like she'd faint at the sight of real blood." His companions roared with laughter, their voices carrying across the training yard where hundreds of warriors prepared for the trials that would begin at dawn. Eric Bloodaxe, whose name was earned through years of savage warfare, shook his head with mock sympathy. "Perhaps she's here to offer entertainment between matches," he suggested, with a leer that made my skin crawl. I'm sure the Warlord could find uses for such a delicate little thing. The crude suggestions that followed were bad enough, but what hurt more was the way other warriors simply ignored me, as if my presence was so insignificant it didn't warrant acknowledgement. I had trained for this moment my entire life, had pushed my body to its limits and beyond to earn the right to compete, and they dismissed me as completely as if I were invisible. But I had expected the mockery. What I hadn't expected was the doubt that crept into my own heart as I watched the other competitors demonstrate skills that seemed impossibly beyond my reach. These weren't just warriors. They were legends in the making. Men and women who moved with deadly grace, whose weapons seemed like extensions of their own bodies, whose very presence radiated the kind of power that commanded respect and fear. Watching them spar was like watching wolves among sheep, and I was definitely the sheep. "Second thoughts?" asked a voice behind me, and I turned to see Captain Aldrich Stormheart, the grizzled veteran who served as the trial master. His weathered face showed neither mockery nor sympathy, just the neutral assessment of someone who had seen countless hopefuls arrive with dreams too large for their abilities. "No, sir," I replied, though my voice sounded small and uncertain even to my own ears. "I'm ready to prove myself." "Prove what exactly?" Eldrick asked, not unkindly, but with the directness that marked all successful military leaders. "What can you offer that these seasoned warriors cannot?" It was a fair question, and one I had been asking myself since arriving at Ironhold. What could I possibly bring to an elite fighting force that valued strength above all else? I was faster than most gave me credit for, and my accuracy with throwing knives was exceptional, but those were hardly the qualifications Warlord Blackwater sought in his personal guard. "I can learn," I said finally, knowing how pathetic it sounded. "I can work harder than anyone else here. I can prove that heart matters as much as muscle." Captain Aldrich studied me with eyes that had seen too many battlefields, too many young warriors broken by their own ambitions. "A heart matters," he agreed quietly. "But heart alone won't keep you alive when facing enemies who want nothing more than to see you die screaming." Before I could respond, a horn sounded across the fortress, its deep note echoing off the stone walls and signaling that the trials would begin with the dawn. Around me, warriors began making their final preparations, checking weapons and armor with the methodical precision of professionals preparing for war. I made my way to my assigned quarters, a small cell in the lower levels of the fortress that I shared with 3 other competitors. They had already claimed the best sleeping spots and made it clear that my presence was an inconvenience they would tolerate rather than accept. "Try not to embarrass us all tomorrow, little bird," said Ingrid Iron Maiden, a warrior woman whose muscles had muscles and whose reputation for ferocity was whispered about in taverns across the kingdom. "Some of us have actual chances of impressing the Warlord." I nodded silently and settled into my corner, pulling out the small bundle of belongings I had brought with me. Most warriors carried elaborate weapons passed down through their families, ancestral blades with names and histories that spoke of generations of glory. I had a simple steel dagger, well-maintained but unremarkable, and leather armor that had seen better days. But hidden beneath my other possessions was something I had never shown to another living soul. A small stone tablet covered in runes so ancient that even the scholars of Ironhold's libraries couldn't translate them. I'd found it buried beneath the ruins of an old temple near my home village, and something about the symbols had called to me with an intensity I couldn't explain. The runes seemed to shift and change when I wasn't looking directly at them, and sometimes I could swear they glowed with their own inner light. But whenever I mentioned this to others, they dismissed it as imagination or wishful thinking. Just another sign that the healer's daughter was better suited to tending herbs than understanding true power. As I traced my finger over the mysterious symbols, I felt the familiar tingle of energy that the runes always produced. It was subtle, like the whisper of wind through leaves, but it filled me with a sense of possibility that I couldn't quite name. Tomorrow, I would face the warrior trials, would attempt to prove myself against opponents who outmatched me in every conventional measure of combat ability. I would probably fail, probably be sent home in disgrace to resume my life as a village healer who had dared to dream beyond her station. But tonight, holding the ancient tablet and feeling the power that hummed through its carved surface, I allowed myself to hope that there might be more to strength than size and speed. That perhaps the qualities that made me different from the other warriors might also make me valuable in ways they couldn't understand. The runes pulsed with warmth against my palm, almost as if responding to my thoughts, and for just a moment I could have sworn I heard voices whispering in a language older than memory. Words that spoke of hidden power, of destinies that couldn't be measured by conventional standards, of ancient bonds between mortal warriors and forces beyond mortal understanding. Then the moment passed, leaving me alone in my corner of the cell with nothing but hope and determination to sustain me through the trials ahead. Tomorrow would test everything I thought I knew about myself, would force me to confront the gap between my dreams and my abilities. But tonight, for just a few precious hours, I could hold on to the belief that sometimes the most unexpected warriors could surprise everyone, including themselves. The ancient runes seemed to pulse in agreement, and I fell asleep clutching the tablet to my chest, dreaming of battles where victory came not through strength alone, but through understanding powers that others had forgotten how to recognize. The first day of the warrior trials dawned grey and cold, with storm clouds gathering over Ironhold's battlements like an omen of the conflicts to come. I woke before sunrise to find my cellmates already gone, their armor and weapons missing from the spaces they had claimed. They hadn't bothered to wake me, probably hoping I would oversleep and miss the opening ceremonies entirely. But I'd been too nervous to sleep deeply, too aware that today would determine whether my dreams had any foundation in reality or were merely the delusions of a village healer's daughter who had never learned her proper place. I dressed quickly in my simple leather armor, strapped my dagger to my belt, and made my way to the great courtyard where hundreds of warriors were already assembled. The sight that greeted me was both magnificent and terrifying. Warriors from every corner of the northern kingdoms stood in perfect formation, their weapons gleaming in the pale morning light, their faces set with the grim determination of people who had dedicated their lives to the art of war. These were the elite, the legendary fighters whose names were spoken in hushed tones around tavern fires, and somewhere among them was Warlord Thane Blackwater himself. Though I couldn't identify him in the sea of intimidating figures that surrounded me, competitors. Captain Aldrich's voice boomed across the courtyard, instantly silencing hundreds of conversations and drawing every eye to the raised platform where he stood. You have come to Ironhold seeking the greatest honor a warrior can achieve, a place in the Warlord's personal guard. Over the next 3 days, you will be tested in ways designed to separate the truly exceptional from the merely competent. He gestured toward a series of obstacles that had been erected throughout the fortress grounds. Everything from towering walls to weapon ranges to combat circles where individual duels would take place. The trials are simple in concept but brutal in execution. Only those who demonstrate superior skill, unwavering courage, and absolute dedication to victory will advance to the final challenges. My stomach clenched with anxiety as I realized the magnitude of what I was attempting. These weren't just tests of fighting ability, but comprehensive evaluations of everything that made a warrior valuable. How could I possibly compete against people who had been training for this moment their entire lives? The first trial is endurance, Captain Aldrich announced, pointing toward an obstacle course that stretched for miles beyond the fortress walls. You will run the Gauntlet of Sorrows, through terrain that has broken lesser warriors and across challenges that test both physical stamina and mental fortitude. Those who fail to complete the course within the allotted time will be eliminated immediately. A murmur of anticipation rippled through the assembled warriors, many of whom began stretching and preparing their gear for the brutal test ahead. I touched the hidden pouch where I kept my ancient rune tablet, drawing comfort from its presence even though I couldn't understand why a collection of carved symbols would make me feel more confident about a physical challenge. Begin, Captain Aldrich shouted, and suddenly hundreds of warriors were moving at once, streaming toward the starting line with the coordinated efficiency of a military unit. The first mile of the course was deceptively simple. Just a straight run across open ground that allowed the competitors to settle into their preferred pace. I found myself in the middle of the pack, not fast enough to keep up with the sprinters, but not slow enough to fall behind the heavy armor specialists who relied more on strength than speed. But as the course progressed, the challenges became increasingly brutal. Rope climbs that left my arms screaming with fatigue, wall scaling that demanded both agility and upper body strength I wasn't sure I possessed, and water obstacles that soaked my leather armor and made every subsequent challenge twice as difficult. Having trouble, little bird? Bjorn Ironside called out as he passed me at the 7th mile mark, his massive frame moving with surprising grace despite the weight of his equipment. Perhaps you should turn back before you embarrass yourself further. His companions laughed as they surged past me, their superior conditioning becoming more apparent with each passing obstacle. I was falling behind, my smaller stature becoming a liability as the course demanded increasingly impressive feats of physical prowess. But as despair began to creep into my thoughts, something strange happened. The rune tablet in my pouch grew warm against my side, not uncomfortably hot, but pleasantly energizing, like standing near a hearth on a cold winter morning. And with that warmth came a surge of strength that I couldn't explain. Suddenly my legs felt lighter, my breathing became easier, and obstacles that had seemed impossible moments before became merely challenging. I found myself moving with fluidity I had never experienced, scaling walls with the grace of a cat and navigating rope courses with the confidence of someone who had been born to climb. Other competitors began to notice my unexpected surge in performance, their expressions shifting from amusement to confusion as the little bird they had dismissed began overtaking seasoned warriors with years more experience. What in the 9 hells? Eric Bloodaxe muttered as I passed him during a particularly difficult climbing section, moving with speed and precision that defied my earlier struggles. I didn't have an answer for him, didn't understand what was happening to me any more than he did. All I knew was that the ancient tablet was somehow lending me strength, filling gaps in my abilities with power that felt both foreign and familiar. The final challenge of the gauntlet was the Warlord's Wall, a 50-foot vertical obstacle that had to be climbed without ropes or assistance. Many warriors had already attempted it, some succeeding through brute force and determination, others falling back to earth with injuries that eliminated them from further competition. As I approached the base of the wall, still energized by whatever force the runes had awakened within me, I heard laughter from above. Several competitors who had already completed the climb were perched at the top, watching the struggles of those below with the superior amusement of people secure in their own success. "Look, it's the healer's daughter," one of them called down. "Think she'll make it halfway before giving up?" "I'll give her credit for trying," another replied with mock generosity. "It takes courage to attempt something so obviously beyond your capabilities." Their words stung, but they also fueled a determination that surprised me with its intensity. I placed my hands on the rough stone and began to climb, relying on technique and balance rather than the brute strength approach favored by larger warriors. The warmth from the rune tablet spread through my entire body now, guiding my movements and showing me handholds that others had missed. I ascended the wall with steady progress, my confidence growing with each foot of height I gained. But it was when I reached the top that everything changed. As I pulled myself over the final ledge, the ancient tablet suddenly blazed with light so bright it was visible even through the leather of my armor. The carved runes seemed to dance and shift on the stone surface, forming patterns that hurt to look at directly, but filled me with a sense of recognition that went beyond conscious understanding. And standing there, having apparently watched my entire ascent with growing interest, was a figure who could only be Warlord Thane Blackwater himself. He was not what I had expected. Rather than the grizzled veteran I had imagined, he appeared to be in his early 30s, with dark hair and silver eyes that held depth suggesting experiences beyond his apparent age. His presence radiated authority, in ways that had nothing to do with physical intimidation, and everything to do with the kind of power that commanded respect through competence rather than fear. But it was his reaction to the glowing runes that truly shocked me. The moment the tablet's light became visible, Warlord Blackwater went completely still, his silver eyes widening with something that looked remarkably like recognition. "Impossible," he breathed, his voice barely audible over the wind that whipped across the fortress battlements. "Where did you get that?" Before I could answer, he stepped closer, and I caught sight of something that made my heart stop. Carved into the leather bracer on his left arm was a rune identical to one of the symbols on my ancient tablet, glowing with the same mysterious light that currently surrounded me. "You carry the wardstone of Valdris," he said, his voice filled with wonder and something that might have been awe. "I thought they were all destroyed in the last war." "I don't know what that means," I admitted, though the name Valdris sent shivers down my spine for reasons I couldn't identify. "I found the tablet in some ruins near my village. No one could tell me what the symbols meant." Warlord Blackwater studied me with intensity that made me feel transparent, as if he could see through to my very soul. "The wardstones were created by the ancient mage warriors, bonds between mortal champions and forces beyond the physical realm. They haven't been seen for over a century, and most scholars believe they were legends rather than historical artifacts." He extended his arm, showing me the rune carved into his bracer. "This is the only one known to still exist, passed down through my family line for generations. If you truly carry another wardstone, then you are far more significant than anyone could have imagined." The implications of his words hit me like lightning. The mockery, the dismissal, the assumption that I was nothing more than a misguided village girl playing at being a warrior, All of it was suddenly revealed as catastrophic misjudgment. "What does it mean?" I asked, though I was already beginning to suspect the answer would change everything about my understanding of myself and my place in the world. Warlord Blackwater smiled, and the expression transformed his stern features into something almost paternal. "It means, young warrior, that the trials are over for you. Anyone who carries the mark of Valdris has already proven their worth in ways that transcend conventional tests." Around us, the other competitors who had successfully completed the gauntlet stared in stunned silence, their earlier mockery replaced by confusion and growing respect. The little bird they had dismissed had somehow revealed herself to be something unprecedented, something that commanded the personal attention of the most feared military commander in the known world. But as exhilarating as this recognition was, I couldn't shake the feeling that discovering the truth about my ancient tablet was only the beginning of a journey that would test me in ways I couldn't yet imagine. The wardstone pulsed against my side with warmth that felt almost alive, and I realized that my life as a simple village healer was over. Whatever destiny the ancient runes represented, I was about to discover that some powers chose their bearers rather than the other way around. Don't miss what happens next in this epic tale of hidden power and ancient magic. What secrets will the wardstone reveal about Kira's true destiny? How will the other warriors react to her incredible transformation? Subscribe to our channel and hit that notification bell to witness the stunning conclusion, where ancient prophecies come to life and the true trials begin. The most shocking revelations are yet to come. 3 months had passed since the revelation at the warrior trials, and my life had been transformed in ways I could never have imagined. The mockery and dismissal I had endured were now distant memories, replaced by the respect and sometimes fear that came with being recognized as a wardstone bearer. I had not only earned a place in Warlord Blackwater's elite guard, but had become his most trusted advisor on matters involving the ancient magics that most warriors had forgotten existed, but it was the growing connection between Thane and myself that truly amazed me, a bond that went far beyond the professional relationship between commander and subordinate. This morning found me in the archives beneath Ironhold, surrounded by scrolls and tomes that chronicled the history of the mage warriors who had once protected the northern kingdoms. What we had discovered together over the past weeks painted a picture of power and responsibility that was both exhilarating and terrifying. The wardstones were not merely magical artifacts. I read aloud from a text written in the old tongue, translating the ancient words for Thane's benefit. They were living bonds between chosen warriors and the elemental forces that govern our world. Each stone chose its bearer based on qualities that transcended physical strength or conventional skill. Thane looked up from the map he had been studying, his silver eyes reflecting the candlelight that illuminated our underground sanctuary. Over the months, I had learned to read the subtle expressions that crossed his face. And right now I could see the same mixture of wonder and concern that had marked all our research into the wardstone's true nature. "What qualities?" he asked, though his tone suggested he already suspected the answer. "Courage in the face of impossible odds," I continued reading. "Compassion for those unable to protect themselves. The wisdom to know when mercy is stronger than violence. And most importantly, the ability to see beyond surface appearances, to the truth that lies beneath." The description made both of us uncomfortable because it so perfectly matched what we had discovered about our own selection by the ancient artifacts. Thane's wardstone had chosen him not because he was the strongest warrior in his generation, but because he led with intelligence rather than brutality, inspired loyalty through competence rather than fear, and mine had chosen me not despite my apparent weakness, but because that perceived weakness masked qualities the stone recognized as essential for the battles ahead. "The text mentioned something else," I said quietly, hesitating before sharing information that would change everything between us. "The wardstones were designed to work in pairs, When two compatible bearers are found, their combined power becomes exponentially greater than what either could achieve alone. Thane went very still, his attention shifting from the ancient map to my face with intensity that made my heart race. Compatible in what way? Soul-deep harmony, I read, my voice barely above a whisper. A resonance of spirit that allows the bearers to share not just power, but understanding, emotion, even consciousness itself. The texts call it the eternal bond, a connection that transcends mortality and time. The silence that followed was charged with possibility and tension in equal measure. Over the months, we had grown closer in ways that went far beyond professional collaboration. Our research sessions often lasted well into the night, filled with conversations that ranged from ancient history to personal dreams. I had caught him looking at me with expressions that had nothing to do with military hierarchy, and I suspected he had noticed the way my pulse quickened whenever he stood too close. But neither of us had acknowledged what was growing between us, too aware of the complications that would arise from a romantic relationship between a warlord and his newest guard member. "Kira," Thane said quietly, and my name on his lips sounded like a prayer. "There's something you need to know about why I was so shocked to see your wardstone." He rolled up his sleeve, revealing the rune carved into his bracer in its full glory. In the candlelight, I could see details I had missed before, intricate patterns that seemed to move and shift as I watched. "This isn't just any wardstone," he continued, his voice thick with emotion I couldn't identify. "It's the Heartstone of Valdris, the most powerful of all the ancient artifacts. Legend says it can only bond with someone whose soul is perfectly matched to its bearer." The implications hit me like lightning. I mean that when your stone responded to mine, when they began glowing in harmony with each other, it wasn't just recognition of power," he said, stepping closer until I could feel the warmth radiating from his body. "It was recognition of destiny. The stones were telling us something that our hearts already knew, but our minds weren't ready to accept." I looked down at my own wardstone, now glowing with steady light that pulsed in perfect rhythm with Thane's Heartstone. "What are they telling us?" Instead of answering with words, Thane reached out and gently touched my face, his fingers tracing the line of my cheek with reverence that took my breath away. "They're telling us that some bonds are written in the fabric of reality itself, that some connections are so fundamental they transcend individual choice." "And what do you believe?" I asked, leaning into his touch despite the voice in my head that whispered warnings about the complications we were courting. "I believe," he said, his silver eyes holding mine with intensity that made the world around us fade away, "that I have been waiting my entire life for you without knowing what I was waiting for. I believe that every battle I've fought, every choice I've made, has been leading me to this moment." When his lips met mine, the wardstones exploded with light so brilliant it illuminated the entire archive chamber. But more than light, I felt power flowing between us. Not the cold magic of spells and enchantments, but something warm and alive and fundamentally right. Through the connection the stones created, I could feel Thane's emotions, as if they were my own. His wonder at finding someone who understood the burden of leadership, his gratitude for discovering that he didn't have to face the future alone, his love for the woman who had walked into his life disguised as a failed warrior seeking validation. And he could feel my emotions in return, my amazement at being valued for qualities I had never recognized in myself, my relief at finding someone who saw strength where others saw weakness, my love for the man who had looked past every surface impression to see the person I truly was. "The eternal bond," I breathed against his lips, understanding finally flooding through me. "This is what the texts were describing. This is what the wardstones were designed to create," he agreed, his arms tightening around me with possessive tenderness. "Not just magical partnership, but soul-deep connection that makes both bearers stronger than they could ever be apart." As we stood there in the candlelit archives, surrounded by the accumulated wisdom of ages, and bathed in the light of artifacts that had waited centuries for this moment, I reflected on the journey that had brought me to this incredible destination. 3 months ago, I had been the village healer's daughter who dreamed of proving herself worthy of something greater. The other warriors had mocked me, dismissed me, treated me as a joke who didn't understand her own limitations. Now I stood as bearer of one of the most powerful magical artifacts in existence, bonded to a man whose strength complemented my own, in ways that transcended conventional understanding. The little bird they had laughed at had become something unprecedented, something that ancient prophecies had foretold, but no one had believed could actually exist. What happens now? I asked, though I was beginning to suspect that our future would be as extraordinary as our beginning. Thane smiled, and the expression was filled with love and anticipation and absolute certainty. Now we face whatever challenges await us together. The Wardstones didn't choose us just for our individual qualities, Kira. They chose us because the world needs what we can become when our powers are united. He gestured toward the maps and texts that chronicled growing threats from the southern kingdoms, political instabilities that could tear apart the fragile peace his leadership had maintained. There are battles coming that will require more than conventional military strategy. They'll require the kind of power that can only be wielded by warriors who understand that true strength comes from unity rather than domination. Then we'll face them, I said with confidence that surprised me with its strength. The girl who failed every conventional test of warrior ability, and the warlord who leads through wisdom rather than fear. Together. The Wardstones pulsed with warm approval, their combined light creating patterns on the archive walls that looked almost like words of blessing written in a language older than memory. And in that light, I could see our future stretching ahead of us. Battles fought not just with sword and shield, but with the kind of magic that transformed enemies into allies. Conflicts resolved through understanding rather than conquest. A love that would reshape not just our own lives, but the destiny of entire kingdoms. The warrior trials had tested my physical abilities and found them wanting, but they had also revealed something far more important, that sometimes the most powerful warriors are those who look least like what people expect strength to be. The ancient runes had chosen well, selecting not the strongest or fastest or most conventionally skilled candidates, but the ones whose hearts were large enough to bear the weight of destiny and whose souls were compatible enough to share the burden of protecting a world that desperately needed their unique form of strength. As Thane and I prepared to leave the archives and return to a world that would never look quite the same to either of us, I touched the Wardstone at my side and smiled at the warmth that flowed through the connection we shared. The mockery was over, the trials were complete, and the real adventure was just beginning. Thank you for joining Kira on this incredible journey from outcast to legend. If this tale of hidden strength, ancient magic, and destined love inspired you, please subscribe to our channel for more amazing stories that prove our greatest power often comes disguised as our deepest insecurities. Share this story with someone who needs to remember that being underestimated by others can be the first step toward discovering extraordinary abilities within yourself. Hit that subscribe button and notification bell to never miss our latest tales of warriors who find strength not through conquest, but through connection. Magic that chooses the worthy over the expected, and love that transcends every boundary except the ones we create in our own hearts.